Hello, welcome everybody to our session. My name is Davidovic and I'm representing the Human Innovation Platform City of the Future. And I have the pleasure to, together with Grace Gutierrez from UN Habitat, opening and moderating this session. We're very pleased and happy to have organized this session as Innovation Platform of the Future, together with our partners from Habitats and the representatives of the Cities of the Future, Benefits and Lüneburg. We expect various interesting inputs and good practices from urban and rural labs, as well as guiding principles and frameworks concerning how the transfer and scalability of best practices of urban rural linkages can be supported. I will present the Innovation Platform City of the Future and the so-called Zukunftsstadt and its background during my part later in detail. And Grace will also say some words and introduce to you and Habitat. We will also have a small poll afterwards. Grace will introduce you to it. And I will shortly give you a very, very short introduction to the overall goal and aim of this workshop, and then hand over very quickly to Grace. So the session, what's the aim of the session? What's the goal? Why are we partnering? So the session will highlight tools and practices towards partnerships that contribute and support the Agenda 2030 towards sustainable development of regions and of cities. So we want to, in the session, share some of the available global tools and frameworks in enhancing urban-rural partnerships. We will also demonstrate some ongoing initiatives at the global and the local context. And we'll give insights and explore partnerships for sustainable development that support urban-rural cooperation and highlight governance approaches. Very shortly on that one, and I'm pleased to have Grace with me now. Welcome, Grace. Hello.
Thank you so much, Dajana, and welcome to the participants. Thank you so much for joining us for this session. We're hoping to have an exciting time together. So at this point, Dajana, you can go to the next slide just to share what the agenda will be. We'll be having 3 sets of presentations and sharing. And as per our agenda, or what we'll be looking at, in the 3 sets, we'll be looking at the tools. Secondly, we'll be looking at some pilots or some activities, initiatives that have been set up. And finally, we'll be looking at some existing case studies or things happening on the ground, which is basically the role of this the objective of this session. So the first session is mainly by UN Habitat. UN Habitat has this initiative about urban-rural linkages, guiding principles and framework of action, which is an initiative that was by over 130 stakeholders in over 40 international institutions. We'll be hearing more about it in regards to following up some of the global agreements and frameworks that were set up by member states. That is the Agenda 2030, that is the SDG that most of us are conversant with, and the New Urban Agenda, which advocates that no one is left behind and no space is left behind. We'll also be hearing from Dr. Sandra, who will be sharing with us the European Green Deal towards shorter food supply chains. So we are hoping to have a great session. And for now, I would like to invite Camilo Romero is an urban and regional and policy consultant from UN Habitat. He has been working on urban rural linkages for almost 2 years now. So he'll be sharing with us on what framework or tools and methodologies that UN Habitat has set in place in these agenda of enhancing urban-rural partnerships through this tool that is the urban-rural linkages guiding principles and framework of action. So over to you, Camilo.
Thank you very much, Grace, for the presentation. And also it's a pleasure for me to be here today with us. As Grace just introduced me, I'm Camilo Romero. I'm working with UN Habitat, particularly on urban-rural linkages. And today I'm going to present you what is UN Habitat doing in this regard on urban-rural linkages. So I'm going to start sharing my screen for the presentation. Just one moment, please. So I think can you see it now?
I think it's beginning, it's starting.
Yes, we can see it, Camilo. You can put on full screen.
Okay, so this presentation was going to be originally delivered by Remy Sietchiping, but I apologize on behalf of him. I'm just going to present what UN Habitat is going to do. So to start with, this is the outline for this presentation. First, we are going to have an introduction, then I'm going to pass to present you the UN Habitat Framework, Urban-Rural Linkages Guiding Principles. Then we are going to pass to some case studies and then just close with some information about relevant events. So to start with, I would like to start defining what UN Habitat understands by urban-rural linkages. So it's a complex web of connections between rural and urban dimensions. And this web is composed by flows of people, goods, capital, and information, but also by the interaction between economic sectors and activities, for example, between agriculture, between services, between manufacturing. We can further elaborate on this definition and also say that, for example, all these flows and interaction are mediated by infrastructures, these interactions and flows are processes. But yes, so I'm going to continue. Having defined what is urban-rural linkages, UN Habitat initiated a participatory process that culminated in 2019. This was on which, as an outcome of this process, 10 guiding principles were agreed by over 130 stakeholders, and also 11 entry points that compose a framework for action to start managing these interactions between urban and rural areas. Also, in 2019, we have that the resolution on urban-rural linkages was approved by UN Habitat. So this became like one of the mandates of UN Habitat to start working on this and to strengthen urban and rural interactions. So to tell you which ones are the principles that UN Habitat consider essential or necessary to start managing this interaction between urban and rural areas. So these are the 10 guiding principles, like very important that it has to be locally grounded interventions, but also integrated governance. So this framework that proposed UN Habitat to manage this interaction, it has to be a multi-stakeholder approach, like a multi-sectoral and multi-scalar. So this is the point of integrated governance. Also, we have that it has to be a systematic approach that has to be financially inclusive. Also, we are talking about balanced partnerships because like in these interactions and flows between urban and rural areas, many actors are involved. Also, this has to be a human right base and participatory engagement, and at least like the policies or intervention that are seeking to manage this interaction also they must be also evidence-based. So now I'm presenting here what are the entry points that are all those interested to start managing urban-rural linkages can use. So we have first 5 actions that are fundamental to start creating an enabling environment for strengthened urban-rural linkages. So we have governance, legislation, and capacity development. Also, we have planning, investment, and also we have the power of communities, of course, knowledge. Then we have some entry points that can be used. So economic development, but also infrastructure is an entry point to start managing these relations. Integrated approaches to food, nutrition, and public health are also a very important entry point. But also environmental impact and natural resources and land management. Land management is also very important when managing urban and rural linkages. So how this fits in the global agendas. So both the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the New Urban Agenda acknowledge the importance of regional and territorial approaches that integrate urban and rural functions to meet their goals and objectives. So the graphic that you're seeing now, you can see how the 10 guiding principles are related to each one of the SDGs. So I'm going to continue. So now I'm going to present what UN Habitat is doing in this regard. So UN Habitat is supporting over 10 countries in developing urban-rural linkages sensitive policies. And there are over 10 active partnerships on the urban-rural linkages world. So in this map, you can see where UN Habitat is supporting countries, like most of the countries are concentrated in Africa and also in Bolivia. Also, UN Habitat is working actively in advocacy and developing toolkits. So this is a continuous and constant activity for every geographical region and we are using diverse entry points for that. So we are actively producing information and sharing practices through newsletters and webinar series, but also there is a very important platform that is a milestone on this discussion on urban-rural linkages. That's the International Forum that had its first edition last year and in Songjiang, China, and we are going to have the second International Forum next year in Songjiang, China as well. Also, knowledge creation and sharing on the are key to address the upcoming demand by member states, local and regional governments, and stakeholders. So there is a demand for guidance on this regard, and UN Habitat is producing several normative products, but also sharing best practices. So we have published a compendium of case studies, and there is an upcoming second compendium on inspiring practices on urban-rural linkages, but also on the normative side. This year also it was published a guide on mainstreaming urban-rural linkages in national urban policies. So now I'm going to present you some of the case studies that have been selected as best practices on urban-rural linkages. So first we have this case study of rural-urban governance in the Alpine space. So this is six countries are involved in this initiative. It's a cross-jurisdictional program linking rural and mountainous communities with urban communities in the European Alps. So why this is important, this initiative, why UN Habitat tries to highlights this initiative, because it reflects like how the urban-rural linkages guiding principles are applied. So in this initiative, we can see how it's a locally grounded intervention, but also reflects the principle of integrated governance. We have 6 countries here involved in this initiative, but also use like some of the entry points that the urban-rural linkages guiding principles promotes, for example, territorial economic development and infrastructure. Another case study is this case of Nepal, that is called the Rural-Urban Partnership. Here also, like most of the guiding principles are reflected. So this partnership also seeks to strengthen urban and rural areas by bringing several levels of governments and actors. Third case that I'm bringing today to here. I'm just going to close.
You should close.
The local food partnership in Grenoble, France. So this is also a very good example of integrated governance. So how this metropolitan area bring several actors and not only from the government but community organizations to work on developing a food policy for the whole metropolitan area, while at the same time protecting areas that are important for biodiversity preservation. So what are the lessons learned on this cooperation? So there is an enhanced capacity development. We have a city-city cooperation and learning exchange. And hence, whole government's approaches are very, very important, and partnerships including several actors and sectors, and also the promotion of sectoral programmatic administrative initiatives for territorial development. So these are some of the upcoming global urban-rural linkages events. For the next year, we have the next forum, as already mentioned, the UN Summit on Food and Nutrition on October 2021, and the 11th session of the World Urban Forum in 2022. These are some of the publications that are available for your consultation, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Camilo. Thank you for sharing with us the available framework for strengthening urban-rural linkages, the various tools by UN Habitat, where UN Habitat is working, and available case studies to enhance urban-rural linkages. And also we take note of the events 2021 next year, the Forum on Urban-Rural Linkages, and also the 11th session of World Urban Forum by UN Habitat, and also the UN Food Summit by various stakeholders next year as well in 2021. So at this point, I'd like to welcome Sandra. Dr. Sandra is a friend of UN Habitat. Dr. Sandra is an award-winning architect, author, and researcher specializing in adaptation of traditional knowledge, technology transfer, urban-rural dynamics, and implementation of sustainable legislation. She's the founder of the Free Ideas, which is based in Amsterdam and London. And she's a visiting professor of the UCL Global Institute. So she's also a stakeholder and network member of several organizations, including UN Habitat and UNFCCC. So over to you, Sandra. We can't hear. Please unmute your mic. Yes, you're still muted. Sandra, can you hear us? You're muted. Carl, could you assist? I think she's muted and...
Unmute? Yes, I'm back. I'm back. Is it okay? Sorry.
It's okay.
Yes, thank you. Maybe I just share again. Thank you for having me, and what a pleasure to be with you all again. Could you hear me now well? Great, fantastic. So I had the privilege to work with UN Habitat on a participatory role for urban-rural linkages as one of the stakeholders, seeing the process develop. So many congratulations on engaging with over 100 partners and stakeholders in delivering these guidelines. I've got my hat also with engagement with some other UN agencies. So today, though initially I've suggested that I will be speaking about European Green Deal for the food supply chains, if I may, I wanted to expand a little bit and engage in the issues of scale, of global, regional, and local policy making, because effectively the subject of rural and urban linkages has been with us for a long time, and many UN agencies are engaging, and obviously UN Habitat is leading on that. On the aspect of a European Green Deal and for a shorter food supply chains, in preparation to this event, I have found out that the European Union allocated around 1 billion euros for 180 multi-stakeholder actors projects in relation to shorter food supply chains. Undoubtedly, this connects to urban-rural linkages. Over 100 of these projects are already happening. They are being, they are somewhere there being delivered as part of Horizon 2020 project. And I think this is a form of a tool to engage with. The issue is obviously harvesting knowledge. How do we get the knowledge from all these projects, channel it back to the global policy frameworks, and see how they're engaging on urban level or rural level? So this is just something I wanted to suggest as an introduction. But the world is a different place right now, and the COVID-19 brought an ideas, or a kind of reevaluation of ideas to see whether something has failed us in the past. Indeed, it's a balancing act to find out what worked before, what didn't work before. And if we follow global events since the spring, we could say that food and shorter food supply chains are effectively on agenda of every summit or great many webinars, and this is going to stay for the next year to come. And I think that COVID-19 definitely exemplifies some of the issues and pre-existing conditions, but one of them is a crisis of globalization. So we definitely are in the moment of deglobalization and a huge trend to regionalization. So European Union is perfectly positioned to talk about region. We have 27 countries, but I wanted to pay attention also to other regions such as Asia. Huge things are happening in Asia when it comes to trade, or for example, the Middle East, where we have around 22 countries dealing with, when I think about Arab states right now, working together. So it seems that the scale of over 20 countries plus, it's a good one for regionalization and regional ideas. Now, I wanted to mention a little bit about the UN Decade on Ecosystems Restoration and connection of the whole thematic area of urban-rural linkages to the next year. And I know there are some webinars coming, because effectively we could really talk about bioregions. And so I think that one of the problems of this connection with nature is solutions that are probably maybe identical for deserts, for tropical climate, and for temperate climate. And I think that the regionalization allows us to zoom into the climatic conditions, environmental conditions that are really critical for the food production. Now, and also the story of self-sufficiency has become more and more apparent with COVID-19, simply because the borders are closed. We want countries to be self-sufficient, but above all, cities and regions to be self-sufficient also with their food production when the borders are closed. And we know that cities and rural areas have been self-sufficient for sometimes 5,000 years. Apparently, Paris 200 years ago was a self-sufficient city when it comes to food supply from rural areas. So I'm going to very briefly take you through these three scales, because I think they are important, talking about scale when we talk about policies. And the first one is obviously the global scale. Let's start from the big thinking and multilateralism. And I really wanted to quote 1992 Agenda 21, so 29 years ago, this entire global climate change movement spoke about urban-rural linkages. And there's a really nice quote from Agenda 21 saying that addressing the full range of issues facing urban-rural settlements, and UN Habitat has been leading this debate since 1970. So it's really privileged to have you with all the knowledge you have. So my colleague has quoted urban-rural linkages. Sometimes we engage with other UN agencies, and I wanted to mention COP24 of UNFCCC in 2018. We were lucky to engage UN Habitat together with other Rio conventions and FAO. And out of this event, only today I'm going to quote 3 SDGs, if I may, but we came up with the conclusions that SDG 11.8 is critical, supporting positive economic, social, and environmental links between urban, peri-urban, rural areas. SDG 15.3, when we were talking about land, and one is called 16.17, which is ensure responsible, inclusive, participatory, and representative decision-making on all levels. So these synergies with SDGs are actually very good. If I were to choose out of these really interesting guidelines and framework for action for today's topic on the food supply chains and EU Green Deal, I would probably take number one, locally grounded interventions, which is translating this normative amazing work produced on the global level into the local level. And another one, integrated approaches for food security. Now, I also worked myself with some other agencies, and this is probably a simplified scenario of urban-rural linkages, looking at 5 capitals: natural, human, social, manufactured, and financial, trying to find very simple models of engagement with local authorities, how we could kind of provide a baseline blueprints for engagement between local authorities and the stakeholders on the ground. And these are some of the tools that are possible to create, because ultimately translating treaties could be difficult. So simple infographics, headlines, and I could imagine that some of these things can be implemented in the workshops on the ground with local authorities, finding the way, finding the road. And undoubtedly, I believe that the climate change will stay and still is the biggest challenge that we need to face, both for the food security, but also for urbanization. And there is a challenge with food supply chains, which is interconnectedness on various levels. We are so interconnected that at times, in some places in Europe, the global food supply chains are far more efficient than the local food supply chains. So probably things are out of our control, but that interconnectedness sometimes is an asset and sometimes is an obstacle. Regional scale. I've mentioned about the scale of 27 countries, and that allows us for ecosystem thinking. Now, with introduction on a European Green Deal, I wanted to really quote someone. I was on a webinar a few weeks ago, which is Mr. Jörg, who is the head of cabinet of the first vice president of the European Commission, Franz Timmermans. And he really nicely introduced the European Green Deal in 3 points. So one is the ambition. The ambition is leaving no one behind. So a bit what Grace was referring to in terms of SDGs. Number 2 is new growth strategies. In other words, being sustainable is a new growth strategy for economic development, and it is a growth strategy. So in opposition to some approaches that we have heard from America over the years. And number 3 is a fairness and just transition, connecting really nicely to forthcoming WOOF in Katowice. So there are some affiliated documents with the European Green Deal that I think are really relevant for urban-rural linkages. One is the farm-to-fork strategy that really positions the food security, but also sustainable food production in a center of European ambition and the European Green Deal. A lot is happening on that subject. And another one is obviously the circular economy action plan. This is what you see in front of me, very simple and simplified food supply chain. But the bottom line is the issue of connecting production to the consumer. And sometimes this is disconnected even across continents. So with urban-rural linkages, this is probably one of the major challenges that needs to happen. And there are many initiatives that do that, but they don't talk about urbanism. So if the other thing that the European Green Deal recommends is a level of experimentation. And one of my favorite quotes from the European Green Deal is, "In conventional approaches would not be sufficient." So they're recognizing the business as usual is perhaps not okay. We can experiment. The question is, where would we experiment? So in the context of urban-rural linkages, I'm really passionate about peri-urban areas. These are areas of opportunities. These are very vulnerable areas in some places in the world because this is where the city grows. But that's the meeting place of urban and rural. So the peri-urban areas, I believe, are huge potential for intervention. And obviously aspects of biocircular economy, undoubtedly unexplored, because there is always a question how we can produce jobs in a rural area. So this is a big one. Now, on the local area, social inclusion. So ensuring that the local food prices and organic products are available for all, and that the price of these products is affordable that everyone can purchase them. Another issue that I think is important is an aspect of digitalization. And the positive thing out of COVID, if there could be something positive, despite the fact that it has been a huge tragedy, is digitalization, finding a way of moving food in a digital way sometimes or through digital means to people that do not have enough sufficient food. And there have been some schemes in Europe that have been actually quite successful. And the other aspect that the European Union is thinking about, or European mayors in particular are concerned, is the issue of demographic shifts. That is also a global issue on migration, and UN Habitat is doing a tremendous work on rural-urban migration. But in Europe in particular, we have an issue of depopulation of rural areas. We have an issue of aging population. And there is an issue of the social issue of migrant workers, and particularly now during COVID-19 times, working conditions, spreading of the coronavirus. So there are elements of probably social health equity issues that are relevant for urban-rural linkages. And the final thought on recommendations of European mayors on urban-rural linkages is intermunicipal collaboration. It's a form of collaboration because the European mayors believe that effectively have two separate structures of governance. One is for rural, one is for urban, trying to bring that governance together into collaboration between municipalities and policy frameworks is recommended. Now, to conclude, I think I just have one word that I feel, the word is connect. And there are three levels of connection that I think are critical. One is global, regional, national, and local policies. We have an amazing work done by UN Habitat, equally interesting work done at the level of the European Union. And that needs to be channeled. Massive amount of Horizon 22 projects that I think we need to figure out how to channel to the global normative recommendations that already exist and vice versa. And then another connection obviously is on urban and rural policies and the peri-urban areas physically in space. And this is my final thought for today. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Sandra. I was almost cutting you, but thank you for the interesting presentation and breaking down for us the European deal. Several things. Thank you so much for even how you have ended it, the issue of connect, because some of the keywords that I noted were regionalization, and how you've ended it. You're talking about connect. From global to local, or in local to global, and also now the urban and rural context. So thank you so much. I know our time is so much gone, and I would like to indicate to us that we have a link, we have a poll that we have shared that you can answer a few questions about urban-rural partnerships for this session and tell us about what you think. So at this point, I will, Dajana has projected it on the screen, and it's also on the chat. In both for the speakers and presenters, and also the others who have joined us. So from this point, I would like to pass it over to Dajana and to the second session. Thank you so much. You're muted.
Okay, yes. I'm muted. So great. Thank you so much for your very interesting inputs about the work you're doing when Habitat, and Sandra as well. Thank you so much for giving us these very interesting insights and going to this. In the meanwhile, Grace has projected the poll, so please feel free to enter it, and we will have the results afterwards and introduce them. I will start with the before we do the poll. I will start with the introduction to the innovation platform, right, Grace? And then afterwards. Okay, great. So it's there, and I'm sorry. So this is the slide. I would like to very shortly introduce you to our work and to the innovation platform City of the Future, to provide the frame for what's happening after in the Zukunftsstadt and the City of the Future. So the innovation platform City of the Future, in German it's Innovationsplattform Zukunftsstadt. It is an exchange platform where urban actors get inspired by scientific knowledge, and vice versa. So this is what the overall aim is, and it's about closing the gap between scientific knowledge and decision making and practice. And it also is fostering integrated approaches and effective governance systems as urban living labs in urban and regional contexts. We'll hear very interesting examples afterwards in the inputs. The innovation platform is a collaboration initiative of the German federal government, founded by the Federal Ministry of Research and Education in 2017. The innovation platform supports the development of socially and environmentally sustainable cities, towns, and communities. And its aim is to aiming at knowledge and capacity development. The innovation platform is strengthening exchange and collaboration between the stakeholders, between scientific, political stakeholders, local authorities, and the science. With the flagship initiative, Zukunftsstadt, translated City of the Future, it has different funding activities. And by this, the Federal Research Ministry is encouraging and providing support to municipalities in order to support them to create sustainable change constructively and effectively in their area and the region. And in order to ensure that research leads more quickly, even more quickly, to effective sustainability innovation, the ministry primarily supports implementation-oriented projects that are jointly supported by local authorities and by science. Part of this initiative, Zukunftsstadt, is also the funding program, Stadtland Plus. For example, our session partner, Wertvoll, which we'll hear later, from the Leipzig area is one of these ones. Aim of the whole program is promoting the implementation of sustainable urban development, as well as local and regional partnerships. The innovation platform also focuses on urban-rural linkages, and we are sure that successful implementation of sustainability goals depends on partnerships and relies on partnerships between urban and rural actors and areas at the local level. The innovation platform is we are supporting this process through communication and exchange of ideas with all involved stakeholders. And due to the complexity of urban-rural linkages, strategies for those partnerships have to be locally grounded, as we also heard before. Locally grounded, developed in partnerships, such as urban living labs. And this is including stakeholders across different sectors, across different government levels, at the regional and at the local level, and it's including various stakeholders to together encourage and support sustainable development. Now I have the pleasure to introduce you to two Zukunftsstadt examples. First, you're going to listen to the City of the Future Lüneburg. The city has 43 municipalities and is of great importance in the metropolitan region of Hamburg, and a perfect example for regional networks in order to support urban-rural linkages. And the urban living labs that will now be presented are an important experimental tool to support sustainability, to connect the municipality with its citizens. So the first speaker is Professor Lang from the Leuphana University of Regensburg, of Lüneburg, followed by Seabastian Heilmann from the city of Lüneburg. And he's also commissioner of mobility. Professor Lang is working on theoretical, methodological, and process-related foundations of sustainability science. And in particular, his professorships focus on cooperation and mutual learning processes between different scientific disciplines, as well as science and society, with the aim to develop robust solution options for urgent sustainability problems of the 21st century. Since 2015, Daniel and his group have been strongly engaged in the BMBF-funded project Future City Lüneburg that has been jointly developed and realized by the administration of the Hanseatic City of Lüneburg, civil society actors of Lüneburg, and Leuphana University. Thank you very much and welcome, Professor.
Good. Thanks a lot. It's a pleasure to be here, and we will navigate a bit how we fit into this session, but I think we will find a good way that you see that it makes sense that we present what we are doing. So Seabastian and I will do the talk together. I will first take 2 or 3 minutes to give you an idea why does it make sense that we think in Reallaboren, real-world laboratories or living laboratories. Why is this relevant? And we have heard several aspects: experimentation as a key goal. Then we have kind of the locally groundedness of certain actions, the participatory engagement. I think this is all new challenges if we think about how to govern transformation processes towards sustainability in urban and rural areas. There I think, or we argue that Reallaboren, real-world laboratories are a good means to doing so. Then Seabastian will take around 7 minutes to introduce what we are doing concretely in Lüneburg, and then I will close with another 3 to 4 minutes to outline, well, what can we do to connect what we are doing in this area of Lüneburg to different aspects. And then I'm very happy that Sandra already emphasized the need for connecting. And I think that's one of my closing statements, that I think, yes, Reallaboren are cool, and this is a good way to learn together from each other, with each other. But I think the full potential can only be used if we really connect our activities in Reallaboren. So we're talking about transformations, and I think in this round I don't really have to talk too much, but I just wanted to remind ourselves that when formulating the Agenda 2030 in 2015, 5 years now, we're in the midst of this 10 years that we have for reaching the Sustainable Development Goals. This key idea of transforming our world was in the heart of this entire endeavor. But if we take transformation seriously and really understanding transformation as a fundamental shift of the practices and of the governance that we have at the moment, then we also need to rethink how we govern socio-ecological systems, how we govern kind of our political systems. And I just want to briefly draw on a report of last year of the Environment Agency, of the European Environment Agency, where they kind of reported on sustainability transitions and policy implications of this idea. Well, if we really want to transition these systems, sustainability, how do we need to rethink our policy approaches? And one key aspect was that experimentation is in the heart of such a new governance mechanism. Experimentation and learning, given the situation that we are aiming at governing complex systems. So a classical control idea of, well, we plan, we set goals, and then we formulate measures, and then we get somewhere, does not really work in this realm. And the interesting thing is, if we then go, and this is of an article that we have published 2 years ago, where we, together with real-world laboratories in the state of Baden-Württemberg, developed kind of what are these key characteristics. You see that many of the key characteristics of real-world laboratories very nicely link to this new format, to this new form policy and governance. And therefore, our argument is that, well, real-world laboratories are interesting means to really enable these new governance approaches. And before I hand over to Seabastian, but this was also already mentioned in several of my previous several of the previous speakers, we also need to rethink knowledge, and this is then more from a scientific side. What does knowledge mean, and how do we produce knowledge? And two aspects that are key from a knowledge perspective. And here I cite a paper that was published this year in Nature Sustainability by wonderful colleagues, Albert Nordström and others, that they say, well, we all talk about co-production, but what does co-production really mean? And there you see that many aspects that are also mentioned in the principles on urban-rural linkages, you also find there. That means, well, if we co-produce, then it's about a context-based production of knowledge. It's pluralistic. That means we integrate different perspectives, different ways of knowing. It's goal-oriented and it's interactive. And then the question is, well, what type of knowledge should be produced in such co-production knowledge processes? And this is a paper that Guido Caniglia and I was also involved in this one, where we kind of elaborated, well, what does action-oriented knowledge mean? And there we formulated three key aspects: that it's knowledge that informs intentional design, second, that it's knowledge enhancing shared agency, and third, knowledge enabling contextual realization. And how we do this, and how we have done this over the last couple of years together with the Hanseatic city of Lüneburg, will be now presented by Seabastian. If he's there. Seabastian?
Yes, he is there. Thank you very much, Daniel. Well, I'm going to try to go with you in a short through a short history of that project that we've been doing together now for the past year, in which Daniel has been pursuing for the past 5 years, actually. Welcome to the Future City of Lüneburg 2030 Plus, the Phase 3, an urban real-world laboratory for the local implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. Next slide, please, Daniel. Thank you. Up top, we put one of the main questions of the advisory council to the chancellor, whether the idea of sustainability succeeds is going to be decided in cities. And the city of Lüneburg is especially interesting because of its position in a geographical sense in a rural area. So the city is rather important, a nucleus in the region of northern Lower Saxony. And next one, please. And the main question that the huge project that I'm going to tell you about is asking is, what does a sustainable Hanseatic city of Lüneburg look like in the year 2030 plus, in which its citizens actively implement the Sustainable Development Goals and are aware of their global responsibility? Obviously, a rather big question that we are asking, but it sort of comes in with the whole idea of co-production, co-creation of futures that this might help, that the way that we go about the process of the project, that we might come closer to answering that question together with our citizens. It started from developing visions through concrete actions in 3 phases. The first phase, 160 applicants, 65 cities got to take part of the competition. The citizens of Lüneburg, and especially lots of university students, came up with 25 visions to the question of what does a sustainable city look like in the year 2030 plus. and how do we wish it to be. Those visions then we took a step further to the second phase where we got to compete again and answer the questions of how do we get there and how can we actively shape our city. So the actors came up with lots and lots of workshops with 17 solutions for the time of 2030 and further. And now, thank you to the NWF, the ministry, that we get to take part in the last and final phase and answer the questions of how do our solutions work and how can we make them to be lasting. So it's not only real-world experiments where we try out things that have never been tried out before in Lüneburg, I might have to add. And we actually do get, and that is something that small municipalities, even in Germany, usually do not have the money to actually try stuff out that has not been tried so far. Next one, please. This is rather complicated, this slide, but I'm going to try to emphasize one back, thank you, what you can see up top. Up top is where we try to get a lot of stuff. That is the idea of how do we get it to be lasting. We are doing parallel to the real-world experiment, are trying to write an integrated urban development concept for the city of Lüneburg. And the nice part is that the real-world experiments might actually be evolving towards something that we then can scale towards the whole of the city. And next one, please. And what the forums, the places where we get to interact with the people of our city are on the one hand open forums, which due to the COVID-19 crisis, we can't do right now the way we wanted to during the winter time. So we're actually switching to online formats of talk and interaction with our citizens. A lot of online, actually, some with walking with people outside, which you can do still. Something extraordinary from my point of view is an advisory committee that is bridging between the political, the policy frame of the integrated municipal concept and our real-world laboratory. And what you can see behind me, I haven't been able to integrate it into the slides because this one is really new. We just got it from our designer this morning. But you can see the colors. And the red part is actors of civil society, and the blue part is politicians. So we got politicians to agree that while deciding what major steps are to be taken in this process, civil society always has a majority. And that is something that we haven't had before. Without the laboratory part, I don't think that the politicians would have agreed with that. And on the lower right corner, you can see the future city office from which I'm coming to you today, that we found a place in a city close to the town hall, but not inside the town hall, where all of our 8 colleagues have working space and sort of contribute to the project. Next one. And this is sort of the time frame that we have. Once we do get the experiments to work, or whatever we do find out within them, it might be that one of the experiments fails, then we have actually learned something. And whatever we do learn then goes to the guidelines that are being prepared right now via online forums as well, and with politics and with a lot of experts in the city. And then after the next elections, we do hope to continue it with a really big development concept for the whole city. And this way, it is not just policies that are formulated based on what people think, what should be done, but we actually do have the chance to try out stuff. And on the next slide, I'll just briefly show you one really small example that is really, coming along now. As with many major cities, the way that commodities are delivered within the city, there's lots of pollution involved, lots of cars. And the inner city, as you can see on the top left corner, has a market on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and you can't really reach the market other than coming by bike or coming by bus. And the idea is to get even more people to come to the market and buy stuff there. And due to an elderly population, the idea came up, why don't we offer the service that people, however they come to the market, they can buy their things and they can then drop it off at an electric bike and then have them driven to their homes, which is something that we will start to try out beginning of next year. So that really short overview. Daniel, please continue.
So, and I would skip two aspects that I wanted to mention because I already hear the bell ringing, but just to end from my side, what we are working in other projects on, and where we think that it's, besides learning, this was another object, and amplifying the insights, where we think the huge potential of real-world laboratories is really in connecting. And one project that's SUSTIL, and this is funded in the Stadtland Plus initiatives, there we work together with the Hanseatic City, the administration of the Hanseatic City of Lüneburg, and the district of Lüneburg, to work on how to implement the SDGs with regards to land use in the future, which is really disconnecting of the urban and the rural we have touched upon today, which is kind of a key question. The second connection, and Sandra has briefly explored on this one as well. This is also a team of different urban living labs, or also real-world labs, where we also have a real-world lab then in South Africa, where we collaborate with Stellenbosch University in the Netherlands, and we work on a different type of connection, which is the connection of the food, water, energy nexus. That means it's a connection across different countries, but it's also a connection of different relevant aspects if we look at sustainable development. And the last one, this is a project that is funded by the Social Science Foundation of Canada, the Transform Network, and there we work together with colleagues around the globe on connecting real-world experiments in real-world laboratories that focus on small and medium-sized enterprises and their transformational potential. It means transformative entrepreneurship, and there it's really this connection across different contexts to learn from each other, with each other. It means connecting. A nice link to Sandra, and I think that's also a great point for discussion later on, is from my perspective also, if we work in real-world laboratories, a key. So thanks a lot for your attention, and if you're interested in more, and this is the shift of colors you have seen from phase 2 to phase 3, we make this transition also here. It's www.Lüneburg, LUENEBURG2030.de. There you see this entire universe of Lüneburg 2030. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lange and Mr. Heilmann, for these very interesting insights and how research and practice is together, hand in hand, developing ideas and knowledge and bringing it into real world contexts. Thank you very much. Now we will hear another very interesting project of the City of the Future. It's Wertvoll from the Leipzig region in East Germany. And I would like to hand over to Jörg. He is going to present it, and he will be, and then supplemented by pre-recorded videos, as far as I know, from the practitioners and mayors. So, Jörg, welcome. Thank you very much, and your presentation.
Yeah, Dajana, thank you very much. Thank you to everyone, actually. So probably, there's been a lot on the background already, and also some case studies, and I will just proceed with this. So just to introduce myself briefly, my name is Jörg Böhmer. I work for IfaS, which is the Institute for Applied Material Flow Management, an institute of the Trier University of Applied Sciences, and we're coordinating the project so-called Wertvoll, which is the English term, the German term for the English word valuable. So this is what we're actually talking about. We're talking about valuable partnerships within the region of Leipzig and the rural area of so-called of Wurzener Land. Yeah. Before I start into the slides, just one question or one remark. You're, of course, the participants are invited already to ask questions via the chat. So if you have any questions, not just regarding my presentation and the following video, but also the recent presentations that have been held already, please don't hesitate to post these now, because actually then we can sort out for a short discussion afterwards. So thank you for this and for your contributions. We're looking forward to the discussion, but first of all, I will show some things from the Wertvoll project. Actually, I see that in this view, I cannot see my notes well, so I have to just talk like that. In a second, okay. So yeah, here we go. The question of the project, the general question is, how can urban-rural partnerships and cooperative land use strategies contribute to goals of regional development and the SDGs as well? So I will briefly introduce the project, and afterwards we can show a video where several municipal responsibles from our region will state their view on this whole project and the activities ongoing.
Just really quick, Jörg, if you would put your presentations on full screen. We see the presentation preview mode right now.
Okay, so I've done this actually, but okay, so this doesn't work if I just shift the slide. Let me see. Ah, you see this screen. Great. So you see my notes also. Well,
correct.
I guess if I shift it, I don't have them, but yeah. I can wait a second. I have to go here. So how can this work? I still see on my screen, I see only the presentation. I'm sorry. Strange situation.
Just go ahead and try to share the file again. And start.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Give me a second. So. I suppose it's all the same again. Because here I have a split screen and I don't know, I can probably just... Okay, whatsoever. I think you see the remarks again.
We do, correct, but please go ahead.
Okay, so if it's possible to read on the slides, I will just proceed then. Okay, so yeah, here we go. I'm sorry. No, I don't even... Okay, here we go. So yeah, we're talking as a starting point in the project. We actually had the already running rural cooperation. So we have rural municipalities, 4 of which in the eastern region, Wurzener Land, close to Leipzig. And of course, as you all know, there's a variety of tasks for these for these rural municipalities, and there's usually only few resources to handle all these tasks. And of course, not every municipality has to handle these tasks alone, yeah, and therefore these 4 municipalities formed a cooperation, and there, of course, are various fields of action with regard to especially public goods that exist, as our project is focusing on land use aspects, and we created a little picture to just display these, usually in non-organized systems where you have cities on the one hand and rural municipalities on the other hand. These are very linear dependencies, and sometimes they are quite one-sided, and circular economy in terms of rural development is not implemented so far. And so we have to, of course, take a close look at these relationships and dependencies and develop these. And the basis for this cooperative action to bring together the rural and the urban stakeholders is, at the first place, of course, transparency. So the stakeholders have to be conscious of the relations and these dependencies, but at the same time a mutual recognition. So we need people to recognize that they're depending on each other, and we need people to lead like a fair kind of co-development. And for these development, we need just spaces for new opportunities where we can develop this. And one aspect in terms of land use is the design of multifunctional land use concepts that address and add value to several objectives. So we have not only productivity on the one hand, and let's say, for example, nature or water body protection on one hand, but we can, the question is how we can combine this in the development. And the important point is to integrate, of course, the surrounding conditions of regional markets and efficiently, and in the end to generate regional added value, because if these concepts don't work economically, they will not be sustainable in terms of durability. So this is what the project actually is about, and this is kind of the general framework, you could say, because as you can see, of course, as you know from other case studies, we can organize connections in between land and city, and as I already said, we're focusing on land use aspects in our project. So we want to reconnect segregated functions in landscape, and if properly managed, we can generate additional added value. Just to make it clear a little bit in some pictures, in the background you see an agroforestry system which has been developed some years ago in a research project, and of course you can generate different functions in landscape, but usually and many times you find very a segregated land use, where on one hand there's food production and the other and there's nature conservation areas. And the idea of this concept of cooperative land use strategies is to put these things together in multi-purpose or multifunctional land use systems. Yeah, of course we see these trade-offs, but we have to look at the synergies to make these things also economically feasible. And actually from a lot of projects, we are always working with pioneer activists and pioneers in integrated land use concepts. There's a huge amount of projects, and it's the point is that we have to somehow organize these synergies and make them put them into value in terms of money also. So Wertvoll is developing a lot of different practical solutions. We have the intermunicipal organizational structures that were already mentioned in the first presentations as a vital basis for all this development, and we have climate protection activities, the same as the implementation of EU Water Framework Directive, pilot projects, and the regional food supply chains. And of course, all this is interlinked, and there's a lot of aspects to put into practice. So for all these different solutions, we organize within the project an improved flow of informations, and we especially develop structures. So, sorry. Okay, someone is unmuted. I don't know. So it's about actually the development of structures, pilot projects, and in the end about business models for the implementation of these. A thematic framework for these municipalities, as already mentioned, are of course the SDGs, and we have a central goal, which is goal 11, making cities and settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. And we have some 4 more goals which are key to the development, or the examples we will show from Wertvoll. And this is the affordable and clean energy, the clean water and sanitation, responsible consumption and production, and climate action. So for goal 7, we will see a short interview with Thomas Pöger, the mayor of Thalwitz, which is one of the rural municipalities involved. He will talk about this interconnection between energy development and different land use aspects. You will see Bernd Lacroix, the mayor of Bennewitz. This is the second one of these rural municipalities involved, will talk especially on the water issue, and he will give you some insight in the current activities. And Gesine Sommer from the County of Leipzig, from the Economic Development Group in the County of Leipzig, will talk about the consumption, sustainable consumption and food chains and production patterns. And in the end, Heiko Rosenthal, mayor of the environment of the city of Leipzig, will also address the topic of climate change, which is dealt with in the project. So as already mentioned, it's all about regional added value. I will just go briefly over this because we're short in time. And of course, there's a lot of partners, a lot of networking, which is the key issue. The main activity we're doing in the project is to network. And there's a huge consortium with a really, really highly motivated people really working together. And it's a really a great project, and it's a lot of fun and it's very motivating to work in Leipzig. So we'll go over to the video, and after that we can go over to having some more discussion opportunities. I think Karl Eckert, you can start the video.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start the video. 1 second, please.
Thank you very much.
Die Herausforderung für uns Kommunen hier im ländlichen Raum ist es, kommunale Daseinsvorsorge, bezahlbare Energie und Klimaschutz miteinander zu verbinden. Dies ist oftmals allein für kleine Kommunen nicht möglich. Dinge der Daseinsvorsorge miteinander verbinden. Das heißt, unter anderem wird der Breitbandausbau damit bewerkstelligt, aber auch in der Zukunft gemeinsam mit den Bauern der Region, dass hier Agrarholz angebaut wird, nicht nur um des Agrarholzes willen, auch hier im landwirtschaftlichen Bereich, zum Beispiel Erosionsschutz und auch Hochwasserschutz miteinander zu verbinden. Dem Bauern geht damit kein Feld verloren, sondern es bleibt weiter als Acker bestehen. Aber es kann natürlich hier durch die Winde, die wir gerade auch in den letzten Jahren besonders stark erlebt haben, zukünftig mehr Mutterboden im Acker oder im Feld erhalten bleiben. Um hier eine gewisse Verlässlichkeit und auch eine perspektivische Planung zu bekommen, haben wir Kommunen uns auf den Weg gemacht, um hier auch Gemeinderatsbeschlüsse zu fassen. Die Gemeinde Thalwitz hat zum Beispiel im Februar einen Beschluss gefasst, dass wir uns dazu verpflichten, das angepflanzte Agrarholz in den nächsten Jahren auch hier abzunehmen und in die inzwischen dann geschaffenen Nahwärmenetze auch entsprechend in Energie umzuwandeln. Damit ist es ein Baustein für regionale Wertschöpfungsketten, die hier in der Region entstehen sollen. Und diese Verlässlichkeit ist natürlich wichtig, denn kein Bauer wird sich auf den Weg begeben, hier was anzupflanzen, was er vielleicht in 6, 7 Jahren erst ernten kann und dann vielleicht keinen Abnehmer hat.
Eine von den vielen Aufgaben in der Kooperation des Würzner Landes ist es auch, die Pflege und Entwicklung der Gewässer der zweiten Ordnung, das heißt die Oberflächengewässer und natürlich auch die Einhaltung der Schutzwürdigkeit der Trinkwasserschutzgebiete. Kommunen sollten und müssen in der Pflege und Entwicklung zusammenarbeiten bei den Oberflächengewässern, da ein Oberflächengewässer nie auf einer Kommune anfängt und endet, sondern sie fließen meist darüber hinaus bis in das Gewässer der ersten Ordnung. Und hier ist es daran auch getan, dass die Kommunen so zusammenarbeiten, dass Kosten und Material und Kräfte effizient so eingesetzt werden, dass wir auch die Schutzgüter erhalten können.
Man neben Stärken und Schwächen auch Maßnahmen, die umgesetzt werden sollen, erfasst. Und wir haben eine Schlüsselmaßnahme im Kreisentwicklungskonzept, die sich der Umsetzung mit Umweltressourcen beschäftigt. Und eine Maßnahme in diesem Schlüsselprojekt ist die Vernetzung mit regionalen Produkten. Eine Schlüsselmaßnahme aus diesem Bereich, was sich also auch in unserem Handlungs- und Leitbild widerspiegelt, ist also die Stärkung des Umwelt- und Ressourcenbewusstseins im Landkreis Leipzig. Und da zählt unter anderem auch dazu, dass also die regionalen Produkte gemeinsam vermarktet werden sollen. Das Projekt Wertvoll bildet hier dafür eine super Grundlage. Wir haben vielleicht schon ein gutes Beispiel mit den Bäckereien und mit den angebauten Weizen und mit dem Brot. Wir haben den Grünen Ring, wir haben den Ernährungsrat und wir haben einige Initiativen im Landkreis und auch in Kooperation mit der Stadt Leipzig, die sich diesem Thema widmet. Aber was es braucht, ist eine stabile und nachhaltige Struktur, das heißt also eine Anlaufstelle, wo diese Vernetzung der regionalen Produkte stattfinden kann. Auch hier muss Unterstützung geleistet werden, was die Logistik anbetrifft. Man kann sich vorstellen, vielleicht eine Dachmarke zur Entwicklung, vielleicht regionale Produkte aus der Region des Würzner Landes. Das andere ist, dass natürlich ein besonderer Fokus bei dem Projekt auf die Stadt-Umland-Beziehung gelegt wird. Und gerade hier ist ja die Chance, dass also der Anspruch, auch weiter regionale und nachhaltige Produkte zu erwerben und auch zu konsumieren in der Stadtbevölkerung immer mehr zunimmt und dass also die Region dies leisten kann. Für die Weiterentwicklung dieses Projektes und auch der regionalen Produkte ist die enge Beziehung zur Stadt Leipzig für uns ein ganz wichtiger Faktor. Die Wirtschaftsförderung, mit der wir ja dort schon eng verbunden sind, ist für uns auch hier der Partner und wir denken, dass nur gemeinsam die Stadt-Umland-Beziehung zu meistern ist und da sehe ich uns auf einem guten Weg.
Das Projekt Wertvoll verbindet die Großstadt Leipzig mit dem Wurzener Land, viele Umlandkommunen, die mitwirken. Und uns geht es auch als Großstadt Leipzig im Ereignis des Klimanotstandes darum, Klimafolgen, Klimaschutz aktiv zu betreiben und das nicht nur auf dem Gebiet der Stadt Leipzig, sondern auch mit dem Umland gemeinsam. Da gibt es zwei Möglichkeiten, die wir im Projekt Wertvoll umsetzen. Zum einen natürlich die Integration bei Eingriff und Ausgleich in der Stadt Leipzig im Umland über das sogenannte ICOMAN und ICOBRA, interkommunales Kompensations- und Brachflächenmanagement. Das heißt, Eingriffe in der Stadt Leipzig werden im Umland ausgeglichen und diesen Ausgleich kann man natürlich auch klimaneutral beziehungsweise dem Klimanotstand entsprechend ausgleichen. Und insofern wird bei der Kompensation vor allem auch darauf geachtet, dass die CO2-Bilanz stimmt und wir dem Klimanotstand und damit dem Ziel, dem Langfristziel der CO2-Neutralität nahe kommen. Das kann man zum Beispiel umsetzen, indem man im Rahmen der Wasserrahmenrichtlinie die Gewässernaturierung, Renaturierung im Blick hat, beziehungsweise auch produktionsintegrierte Kompensation bei Landwirtschaftsflächen auf den Weg bringt und damit im Rahmen der konventionellen Landwirtschaft vor allen Dingen auch die sogenannten Blühstreifen in einer richtigen Art und Weise entsprechend anlegt. Und zweitens wäre natürlich dann über diesen Eingriffsausgleich klimaneutral auch überhaupt die Idee, die Region zu dem Thema CO2-Bilanz zu betrachten, das Gesamte nicht nur auf das Territorium der Stadt, sondern auch auf die Umlandkommunen auszuweiten und dort eine Klimabilanz aufzustellen, gemeinsame Indikatoren zu entwickeln, wie man dort auch gemeinsam zu einer Klimaneutralität kommt. Und im Rahmen des Sofortprogramms zum Klimanotstand haben wir das vor allen Dingen beschrieben mit Maßnahmen, Investitionen bzw. Umstieg in die Biolandwirtschaft, Förderung von Schulspeisung und Kantinspeisung mehr zu biologischen Angeboten oder aber auch, indem wir regionale Wertschöpfungsketten stärker in den Fokus nehmen. Das heißt, im Umland erzeugte regionale biologische Produkte entsprechend zu verarbeiten und dann auch im Großraum, auch in der Großstadt Leipzig zu vermarkten. Ein zweiter wesentlicher Punkt, der uns zum Thema Klimaneutralität helfen soll. Insofern ist das Projekt wertvoll, ist die Stadt-Umland-Kooperation und Beziehung ganz wesentlicher Baustein, um die eigenen Ziele zu erreichen. Und ich glaube auch mit diesem Projekt ein Vorbildprojekt, was sicherlich auch im Bundesgebiet oder auch international Schule machen kann.
So yeah, thank you very much for displaying the video, and I'm sorry for the delay. So also took some more time than planned, and but I don't want to Yeah, Dajana is already.
It was great. Thank you very much, Jörg, for this your amazing presentation. Also, the insights from different really practitioners who are working on their daily business with these very important topics. Thank you very much again to all our speakers and the input you've given. Now in the next part, we'd like to shortly also hear from our audience and all the participants of this session. What are your thoughts about the main challenges in urban-rural partnerships? And
just very quick, Dajana, we have
will,
2 minutes for this right now. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, and Grace will introduce you to the results. Thank you very much, Grace.
And thank you so much, Dajana. Here we have 2 minutes, but I see from the main challenge, as we can see, the main ones that are coming out is cooperation. I believe lack of cooperation, the issue of equality, and the issue of understanding are the ones that are coming out as the key ones. And what can we do to address? Okay, so what can we do to address? The main ones are participation, connection, and many others as multi-level governance, integral policies, create win-win situations, good governance. And finally, we are grateful we see majority would like to be involved, especially in sharing tools and also case studies and just learning more about urban-rural partnerships. So thank you very much. The other finally is just definition and concept perception of sustainability. So thank you. Over to you, Dajana.
Thank you. If I may just inject,
Okay,
we'll take
great.
those replies and also put them on the wall of ideas for others to see. And as organizer from the conference, I'd like to also thank all of the participants here. We're now switching to the keynote speaker. So please, thank you and join us for the next presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Eckert.